welcome to How to Make Your Wedding Not Suck. My name is Dan, and today I'm excited to be here with Andrew Wilson. He's a wedding officiant through Weddings by Andrew, and what's really cool about this is I've actually been the photographer for a lot of weddings where Andrew was the officiant, and he actually officiated our producer Kelly's wedding. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah, that was quite a few years ago, and Kelly and Joe, they're one of my favorite couples of all time.
And they're still married, so that's basically it's your fault, right?
Well, I do take full credit for it. Yeah.
Yes.
So not only is it how to make your wedding not suck, I also can help your wedding stick.
There you go.
Your marriage stick. So
there you go. So I'm really intrigued to have you here because I think so many people overlook the value of a ceremony and it becomes this thing to just kind of get through. So like, what is the most common mistake that you probably see brides and grooms making with their ceremony?
I think the most common mistake, and this is kind of a broad, pulling out 30,000 foot view, is that they just don't think enough about the ceremony. That's in part because there's just a lot of other things going on that day. There's the reception, there's the flowers, there's a lot. It's a big production, right? So, and I think sometimes there's a tendency to overlook or to not think enough about what that ceremony will look like. I think that's probably the biggest mistake. And so if you can avoid that mistake, you're on your way to having a great ceremony.
Okay, so paying a little more attention to it. So what are some of the things though that can make a wedding ceremony not just something to endure, which is honestly what it feels like a lot of the time. It's just something you have to get through, but actually something that you can enjoy and have it be a more memorable, valuable contribution to the wedding day itself.
Well, I think a wedding should be fun. That's the first thing. I think it should be fun. People should be given permission to celebrate and have fun, and I think the officiant is a huge part of that, right? They're the guy or they're the gal that are setting the tone for the whole day, and I see my job really as giving permission for people to celebrate that day. And part of the way that I do that, and probably other officiants do as well, is just creating context. So I like to think of it this way, Dan. So if you've ever been on a long road trip and you've come to a scenic overlook and you get out, you look back at where you've been and you look ahead to where you're going. I kind of think of really a lot of milestones in life, but obviously your wedding day is a milestone, a day to look back where you've been as a couple, your story that's got you there. You've probably been through some tough times, some good times, to remember where you've been and then to look ahead at where you're going.
Wow.
I think that really creates context. I think I've been to weddings where it's just forward thinking, a lot of advice given, a lot of just kind of here's what you should do in the future when you have kids and all these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it's not enough about looking back, because looking back to get to this point is a powerful way to create context, which then in that context you can just have a great day of celebration.
So to do this, to create that good experience, like it sounds like you really need to have a relationship with these people. You can't just walk in, open a dusty book that it's just the same lines over again. It sounds like you really take the time to make it custom, wedding by wedding. Is that right? Like,
yeah.
How do you do that?
I think it depends on what you want out of that day. If you just want someone that's it's a transactional thing, they're going to sign the license and it's going to be a done deal, then that's certainly one approach. But if you really want someone to just kind of come alongside you on that day and share in that day, that relational warmth is really important. And so the way I think that you can gauge that is, would I share a meal with this person? And I know that's a big deal for you, Dan, with your clients and other vendors that you use. So just creating that, just knowing that this is a person that I could share a meal with, or we could sit down and have a good time.
Yeah.
Because that officiant really, again, sets the tone for the day and creates the warmth, creates the environment, at least through the word, not fully. Obviously, there's a lot of other pieces, but during the ceremony itself, that you want that officiant to be a person of warmth that's inviting to other people.
Yeah, that's huge. I know in my world with photography, like you can tell when people are comfortable with the photographer or versus when they don't feel comfortable. It comes across as stiff and sort of transactional, like you said, and it kind of stifles the day if that relationship doesn't exist. So that makes a lot of sense in the ceremony. Like you're relying on that person to talk for a while. Like that's a big it's a big part of the day. You know, it's not just a quick event. So now, if you personally were not able to officiate a wedding, but say somebody in your family was getting married, and you were giving suggestions on what to look for, like criteria of a good officiant, somebody that's going to make their day, make that part of the day at least, like really a highlight, something that's memorable that, like you said, sets the stage for celebration and looks back and forward. What are some of those characteristics of that person other than just a general comfort relationally when they meet the first time?
Well, I think you want to ask some questions that will get to the heart of who that person is and what they're bringing to the table that day. So if you're looking for a wedding that's going to be fun and celebratory, you can get a sense of whether or not that person's going to bring that to bear that day.
Yeah.
So, if it was someone that, for some reason they couldn't choose me, or, if it was a sibling or something like that, and I wasn't available, I would say look for that. Look for that in a person, someone that's going to help give your guests, they're going to pull your guests into the day. I think that's a big part of that is so a lot's going on up at the front of the room. That's really important. But you have, depending on how many guests you have a lot of people that showed up, and we want them to be a part of it too. And so we kind of engage them through the stories that we tell, and just through having a good time, getting them to laugh. I think a good sign of a good ceremony is when you can get everyone in the room to both laugh and cry. That's kind of my goal, honestly. So if you can kind of get a sense of that with an officiant, are they going to be able to take me through that range of emotions in that day?
That's great. I now that you're saying all this, I feel like there's a lot of parallels with the photography and what I focus on and the ceremony, because there's a great set of pictures. I see the same reactions. It's obviously at a different time when they're viewing all the images, but as they're sort of walking through the day, the ceremony seems like a mini representation where all of the emotions are experienced in that little spectrum. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the things you had mentioned is I think to be able for the guests to follow along where they're laughing and they're crying and
not at the same time.
Not at the same time.
I mean, that would be
that would be a little tricky.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, I think you actually need to have the people at the ceremony be engaged. Present. They can't be sort of disconnected. And so one of the things, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I've seen so many people when the bride's coming down the aisle, they're hanging over and they've got their iPhone out, or if they're the worst people ever created, they would holding an iPad and taking a picture with the iPad, which is just the worst. What does that do to guest engagement? Is it possible to really have a connected, audience or a connected family? You invite all these people here. You've taken all this time. What are your thoughts on cell phones and media and how that does that disengage people on a ceremony level?
Yeah, I think it does. I'll back up for a second though. I think it's incumbent on the officiant to engage the people. I think there is a tendency for people. So there's the picture taking, but then there's also, I've seen in weddings that maybe I've attended, where people just check out because they're just ready to get to the open bar, right? I mean, they're there, they have to endure this, so there's a guy up there just blathering on, so I'm going to check my phone. So that, I think the job of the officiant is to engage the people. Beyond that, there's an onus on the attendees to give their focus and attention to what's going on up there. And that's hard because, it's 2016 and we're hyper connected. But if we can just as a society say, you know what, we're gonna go unplugged. We're gonna turn off our phones and we're gonna allow the amazing photographers that we have at this wedding. That's a shout out for Dazzle Photography. To do their job and to create great photos and they're just going to be so much better anyway. Yeah. So it might be a social experiment for us to decide to just kind of stay engaged. Yeah.
I've seen this a lot where that's becoming more popular, and it's actually something we send out as a recommendation to our clients now is an unplugged ceremony, which I think gives a little it helps everyone. I think it helps not just the bride and groom. I'm just kind of sharing my own experience with this, but I've seen that it's difficult for people to follow along if their minds are in their in their devices. And I can imagine as a bride or groom standing up there, and you've invited all these people, you spent all this time and money, really trying to create an experience for these guests, and then you look out to a sea of people looking down, posting their lousy photo on Twitter or something, and it's going to get lost in a news feed, and they don't have that experience in their heart. It's more just something that they only remember the fact that they took the photo, like
right.
if that's their way of documenting it. And so my suggestion, let me just say it, I'd suggest try an unplugged ceremony. There's lots of resources on how to do that, but even if it's just something as simple as a chalkboard and you just write unplugged ceremony, turn your phones off. We want you to have the gift of an experience, So I think that combined with a great officiant can make the ceremony properly a really powerful experience and part of the day, not just something to get through.
I'll add, just as from my perspective, not having a 2-hour-long ceremony also aids in that endeavor. Making it not to an appropriate length, which obviously that is determined by the bride and groom. There's a don't have it so long that people check out.
That's true. It's not something to be rushed through, but also, I think people go into it expecting oh gosh, I need to, I got to get through this. I should have brought a book. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It was great to have you. To learn more about where you can get in touch with Andrew, just check out his website at andrewsweddings.com. And to hear more about all the tips that we have to share about how to make your wedding not suck, go to dazzlephotography.com/tips for the full library. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.